Today's episode features returning guest Linda J. Hansen, a renowned author, speaker, podcast host, and entrepreneur. Linda is the owner of Prosperity 101, a platform dedicated to educating both employees and businesses on how their policies and voting choices impact their personal and professional lives. In this engaging conversation, Linda provides her take on current political dynamics, cultural shifts, and the transformative changes occurring in the American socio-economic landscape. She discusses the significant impacts of transparency, exposed fraud, and government efficiency under the Trump administration, touching on key topics like supply chain impacts, economic opportunities, and the changing workforce environment. Linda also shares her thoughts on the power of independent media, encouraging American citizens to be informed and involved. She emphasizes the importance of understanding policies over personalities in politics, and also delves into how Prosperity 101 is empowering businesses and their employees in this regard. Tune in to gain valuable wisdom and a unique perspective on the evolving landscape of politics and policy in America today. As always, if you found value from this content, please like and subscribe. Hello, everyone. Dave Goulas here with the Beyond Fulfillment podcast, and we are back with a returning guest. And today the guest is author, speaker, podcast host, entrepreneur, course creator, and the owner of Prosperity 101, Linda J. Hansen. Welcome back, Linda.
Well, thank you. It's very nice to be back. Good to see you, and hello to your listeners and viewers.
Absolutely. Yeah, we appreciate you taking the time. Wanted to have you back because we spoke last fall on the first episode, and it was just before the election. And lately, we've been doing more kind of real-time pieces about the Trump impact on the supply chain and different current events that are going on. But you yourself, your main core business through your speaking, your writing, your podcast, and then your business that you have, you basically educate employees and businesses on how their policies and the way they vote basically impacts their paycheck. And so just wanted to get your take on different current events that are going on right now and I guess a cultural shift that we've seen over the past several months.
Well, the cultural shift is incredible, and it's really been, not that long. If you think since Inauguration Day, it's been amazing what's happening. And as someone who's been involved in politics and policy for many, many decades, it's exciting to see so many positive changes. And there's a saying that, there are decades in which nothing happens, and then there are weeks in which decades happen. And it's almost like that's been happening, that so many things that are helpful to the American people and the American way of life are becoming in focus again, and it's just exciting. So if you look at the different freedom type executive orders that have come out in terms of freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom in terms of business freedom, a better regulatory environment for businesses, better cultural freedom, the parents' rights. I mean, so many things that are coming out of this administration, let alone let's talk about DOGE and all of the money that has been wasted and squandered through fraud and abuse. And, being able to have this transparency in government. I mean, this is incredible. And I've never seen anything like it in terms of transparency and desire to really shrink the size of government. Over the years, we've heard politicians do all the sweet talk about shrinking the size of government, but they never do it. It's great talking points, but they never do it. And now in such a short time, we're seeing it happen in, like you mentioned, real time. We're seeing it happen in real time. It's very exciting.
Attention e-commerce sellers. Is fulfillment a headache for you? Whether you're fulfilling in-house and you need to outsource, or you're with another 3PL and you deserve better service, Easy DC 3PL can help. We offer personal service, fast response time, and we're flexible to meet your unique needs. Get in touch today and find out how we can help you. Yeah, absolutely. And it's been, as we record this, we're about 40 days or so into the administration. And I don't even have the current count in front of me of the number of executive orders, but there's been a lot of news to keep up with. We do a separate series on just the supply chain impacts because that's my business. And I have another expert that I talk regularly with about that. But let's just bring up some of these current issues that you brought up. So you mentioned Doge. I mean, let's just start there. I mean, I think everyone knew just about fraud, waste, and abuse, and there was a good amount. But what we're seeing, I mean, I don't know that anyone really realized just what the magnitude of what it was. I mean, what's your take on what's come out thus far?
My take is that this is one of the best things that's ever happened to America, is that this is becoming exposed. Wonderful things happen when truth is exposed. For far too long, we've seen people, stealing from the American taxpayer. And we've seen the inequality of what we give to foreign governments versus what is spent on American citizens. We've seen all these things happen, but now we're seeing it in actual numbers. We have the receipts. It's like there's been a lot of us crying about this, but now this time it is really out there for the American public to see. And thankfully, we're living at a time where, uh, you know, independent journalists and broadcasters can get the information out. We don't have to depend on, 3 or 4 cable news networks to give us their narratives, right? So we are able to see more of this, and it's just truly exciting. I think people have been a little shocked at times. I mean, I didn't think anything could shock me after all the years I worked in politics, but even I've just been like, you got to be kidding me. And I think that many of the American citizens feel that same way. You've got to be kidding me. Why are we paying, $50 million for condoms in Gaza? I mean, it's insane, right? And some of the things that have shown are ridiculous like that. But then at the same time, we can see where our tax dollars have been spent on very anti-American programs and policies that are really hurting our citizens. And to get this exposed, when truth is exposed, wonderful things can happen. And so we just have to pray that, evil continues to be exposed, the waste, fraud, and abuse is exposed, and that justice is served. I mean, justice for the innocents, justice for the guilty as well.
Okay. And yeah, the polls that have come out seem to have, overwhelming majority support in terms of, what Doge is doing and exposing all this. But we still see backlash, and we still see, often in the mainstream media, kind of these reports that people are against it. But you would think efficiency and transparency within our government for our tax dollars would be universally supported. Why do you think we're seeing that type of backlash?
Well, follow the money. Follow the money. Anytime you see that backlash, look and see who's funding them. These elected officials who are in Congress forever and forever and ever, and they have, a paycheck that's under $200,000 a year. How are they worth multi-millions of dollars after years in Congress? Who's funding them? Who's funding these protests? A lot of these protests that come up are, what I call paid pop-up protests. You have this small group of really vocal believers that are protesting the issue of the day, right? Protest du jour, and they are funded. And a lot of these people are paid to do that. So remember that. Now, I don't know if you just saw recently, but I think it was the day that President Trump gave, essentially the State of the Union address, but his joint address last Tuesday. There were all through the internet, you could see 22 different Democrat legislators had the very same talking points in interviews. It was like they were saying the exact same words, the exact same talking points, and it was crazy. Now, you look at that and you say, okay, well, who's paying for that narrative? Where is that coming from? So yes, there's going to be opposition. There's always going to be opposition. I tell people, there's never a perfect politician unless you run yourself, of course. And then even that, I don't know about you, but I argue with myself a lot. So, or I change my mind or things. So there's no perfect person, right? But when you see this type of thing happening and you see the extent of the vehement opposition and the hatred and the threats and the absolute non-civility of the opposition. There's more to the story. And as we're finding out more about what's coming out, not just with Doge, but some of these other lists coming out, or even things from JFK files or things like that, we begin to see a thread that tells us all has not been well in terms of how much we can trust our elected officials. And then, so people need to realize that just because people say they're against doesn't mean that they really are. They might be paying might be getting paid $22 million a year to say that, right? So um, we just have to follow the money. Now, there are people who are directly opposed, and of course, I mean, you're always going to have that. But when 77%, I think it was, don't quote me on the exact number, I'm just thinking of the graph I saw after Trump's speech this week, 77% of Americans were in favor of it. So, he won in a mandate, and the American people are saying these are the values we want for America, and we don't want all our money going overseas. We want it to help the victims in North Carolina. We want it to help the victims in the LA fires. We want it to be spent on American citizens. And this is really common sense. We want a closed border. We want safe streets. We want safe water and air. And I mean, this is not rocket science. It's pretty easy to figure out, but somehow elites in Washington, D.C., and then the globalist elites who want control, they don't really like us to have that kind of independence and things. But, the American people have spoken, and we need to keep speaking.
And that's a great point. So you bring up that point in terms of virtually we all want the same thing in terms of we want economic opportunity, we want safe streets, we want good schools for our children, right? We want all of those things. And so often, particularly in politics over, let's just say, the last decade, right? It's been incredibly divided, right? Particularly through fueled by the media and whatnot. But like we saw in the last election, to where there was so much mainstream media attack, right, against Trump, but then seems less effective than ever given the results. And as you see the rise of independent media and so many other alternate channels kind of giving having more popularity, to where, like you said, the message can bypass the mainstream media. Do you see a path for the country to truly be unified?
Yes, definitely. Definitely. And, we will always be a country where there's people who don't agree. I mean, there will always be Marxists who live here. There will always be, the socialist communist agenda. There will always be that. But as a general body of citizens, I do think we can get back to that. And I think the more that we reveal truth, the more people can see. People are waking up all the time. I saw a video just today, I think it was, of a really sweet Black lady who said for the first time in her life, she voted for a Republican, and it shocked her, but she just couldn't go with what the Democrats were standing for anymore. And she said, I got everything, he's following through on what he promised. So, I think, I hope, it's my hope and always been my passion and calling, that I help people understand it's about the policies, not the person or the party. Donald Trump is not going to be president forever. So right now we're talking about him. Yes, he's changed the landscape. There's been a lot. But what are the policies that will follow that? Policies of unity, policies of prosperity, policies of flourishing and freedom for the citizens. That is what we want to have follow that, because that's what really matters, and that's what unifies people when they're safe and doing well, and their families can grow up, and you can choose where you want to live, and what you want to do for employment, where you want your kids to go to school, and you have your own autonomy. That's incredible, and I think that that's something that unites all Americans. And I also think that as we look at this shifting sand, Americans are waking up and saying, they've been lied to. They've been lied to by corporate media, by the oligarchs and the elites in DC and around the world, the World Economic Forum, the World Health Organization, all of that. We've been lied to. And, people are waking up, and I hope it continues. But as they wake up, it isn't enough just to know. It's like with anything, we can know we're supposed to eat better, but we won't really be healthier unless we do, right? And so it's not enough for us to just know about these things that are wrong. We need to know and act on the things to help make it right. And so that's, part of what I like to do is just educate people on how to evaluate different policies, not necessarily telling them specifically how to think about a certain one, but what are the steps to evaluating it? What do you need to think about to protect your own freedom? And once we do that, when we have a freedom-loving citizenry and they understand what they need to do to protect that, then America will be fine. But if we go back on our laurels and sit in our easy chair and just think, well, everybody else will take care of my freedom, that America will not be fine. And that's where we've been. And so we can't go back there.
Yeah, and some of the other shifts too that we've seen, with just some of these orders that have had so much support. We'll just run through a couple of them, but ending the like the men and women sports. I mean, that was a big one that seemed to have universal support. I mean, it makes you think, how did that even happen, where that was even allowed in the first place, and that was just kind of okay for years, right? I mean, what's your take on that whole issue?
Well, we have so many cultural shifts here, and we say, how did that happen? Well, anytime you can have a society that is, kind of brainwashed with fear and, just so many messages, it just becomes easy to manipulate, right? But this just doesn't even make common sense. But yet, just this last week, we had all the Democrats in the Senate voted against the law that would protect men from playing in women's sports. So, I mean, they're saying that they want men to play in women's sports, right? But then for the president's speech, the day of the president's speech, a whole bunch of these Democrat, female lawmakers were showing up in pink blazers and having a little press conference of how much they love women and support women, and Trump hates women and all that, right? Well, they just voted for men to play against women in women's sports. I mean, it's not common sense. So you just have to, again, let's dig deeper and find out, follow the money trail. Who's paying for that? Who is who is paying for that narrative, and how does it benefit them? So this is a much broader issue than people really like to go down, because once you start investigating this, it becomes a huge rabbit hole. But let's just say that people don't just wake up and go, oh, I think I'm going to, support transgender men playing in women's sports today. It is just not common sense. So we need to protect women. We need to protect young girls, not only from injury, but from missing opportunities. Title IX became law when I'm trying to think, when I was in high school. I can't remember, but I know my older sister could not play in sports the way I could. And I think that was fought for so hard. And now, where are the women who fought for women's rights. Now it seems like the only women's rights people on the left want to talk about is abortion. Well, what about the female in the womb's rights? Or what about the father's rights to that child? I mean, there's so many mixed messages and hypocritical actions. And I'm not, I've been mentioning the Democrats a lot, but again, you could call them any name. You could call the Republicans any name. You could put any politician in there. And if these policies were doing that, we'd be having the same results. So it's about the policies, and it's about, the direction these policies take us. It's not always about the person or the party, but it is what it is in terms of having people and parties involved.
Sure, sure. And yeah, like you said, like the ideas ultimately are what's going to win. And
Exactly.
it seems now more than ever, right, that's taken precedence, and this whole the mainstream media has really lost the I guess the control they had on the narrative, to where people are waking up and saying, no, that is a good idea. I mean, oftentimes too, if Trump does it, it's vilified, but if you look at the idea on its own, it should be it's like you said, just common sense.
Right, exactly. And remember, the media just loved Donald Trump, fawned over, Donald Trump, until he took that infamous ride down the escalator to announce he was running for president. And the thing about it is Donald Trump is ready to expose the corruption, and nobody wants to be exposed, so they have to eliminate him in a sense. They've tried everything to keep him out of office and to take away his credibility. That he's not one of them, and that's what the American people love, and that's why so many people who are corrupt are against him. And it's an interesting thing to watch, and it's truly a lesson in human nature. How easily we can be manipulated too if we're really not paying attention. But it's like I said, it's an interesting thing to watch. And as we look at what these policies coming forth are, we're going to have an economic boom as the manufacturing comes back into the US. People have been so concerned about tariffs and things, and as these businesses come back into the US, and it brings more jobs, and then all those communities have more jobs. I mean, it's going to be amazing. And when people just ignore that fact because he's done it before, but it's like you said, it could be the best thing in the world, but just because Donald Trump is talking about it, they have to argue against it, so.
Yeah, and particularly in the short term, right? You're seeing a lot of news reports, a lot of, there's been a lot of stock market volatility, to where and Trump even said it himself with the tariffs, right? There may be a short-term disturbance, but ultimately, like, the goal is to even the trade deficit,
Yes.
bring back manufacturing to the country, and create this golden age of American prosperity. So, I mean, what do you say to people too that are concerned about this? Because clearly, right, the economic times the last 4 years have been challenging for most. There's been record inflation and all the other issues that that have come along with that. What do you say to people that are concerned about the short term when they're seeing this play out? And particularly what's going on with the tariffs and what the news is reporting.
Well, the first thing I'd say is don't fear. Okay. And I think I've shared this on a lot of interviews, but the Bible tells us 365 times, do not fear. I figure that God gives us one of those do not fear statements for every day of the year, right? So we don't have to fear. And I would encourage people to pray and just ask for wisdom into their next steps. But the other thing is, there's always going to be opportunity as this shifts. Yes, one door may close, but five more may open. And if anyone's ever read that book, Who Moved My Cheese, we can understand, that just because one season or opportunity is closing doesn't mean that there's not just a wealth of them elsewhere. And so I think sometimes people are very fearful. We fear the unknown, just as natural people, we tend to fear the unknown. But we don't have to fear that. It's going to be okay. And yes, it might be difficult. I mean, but every job and every season, everybody goes through difficult times at some point in time, right? And so I'm not trying to diminish that. I know jobs have changed for some of my loved ones, but it's still going to be better. And I've often likened it to if you have a cancerous tumor, or you have some sort of disease, right? I mean, just think of a cancerous tumor. You might not notice the symptoms right away, but then pretty soon the symptoms become, something you can't ignore anymore. Well, then once you can't ignore it, you have to figure out how to fix it. So, we look at Doge, we can't ignore these symptoms anymore. I mean, not only are we in, debt, and the culture has been struggling, and, we can't ignore what's happening in America. So we've started to identify, we've identified the tumor in a sense, but then you have to treat it. And if you think a cancer treatment or something, that's not pleasant. You have to go through surgery maybe, or chemotherapy, which, makes you feel awful, and you lose your hair, and, it's a whole process, right? And then, it might be radiation, whatever. But, on the other side of that, you're likely going to be cancer free, and you'll be better. And so it's a process. Anything brings a healing process. And so we might have some bumps in the road, but hang in there. The new opportunities are coming in an amazing way. And I'm not trying to be glib. I'm not trying to be like, Biden's former press secretary who said, well, go get a green job. I mean, this is ridiculous. There's so many jobs out there that are going to be coming, and it's going to be a really exciting time for America as manufacturing moves back in, as the External Revenue Service is up and running, and income taxes are reduced. There's no tax on tips, no tax on overtime. I mean, this is going to be great. So I just want to encourage people with that. Don't fear. And then also the exciting thing about what's happening now, you mentioned about people losing jobs or whatever. So many things are changing in companies as well as in the government, moving away from the diversity, equity, and inclusion hirings, the DEI hirings. And it's all in the news when we've had the plane crashes, and we find out that people were hired based on their gender or their skin color a lot, and not necessarily on their skill set. And as companies and the government move away from that, that is going to open up enormous opportunity, because, I often say, great news, merit is back. Merit matters. So when we can build a workforce that is competent and deserves those positions, because they're showing us they have the expertise, the ability to learn, the work ethic, all of that makes excellence. That's going to be really exciting for America. So opportunity will abound for those who want to ride that wave and jump on board. If you want to get a free ride from the government, like so many have over the many years, that might not be your path. But for those who are willing to work and try new things and learn new things and open new doors, I mean, I think the opportunity is going to be boundless.
Okay. And let's talk about your company for a minute, Prosperity 101. So folks want to learn more about it. What exactly do you do, and who do you help?
Who do I help? Well, my podcast is something that anybody can listen to and learn from, and I'm thankful to hear from a wide variety of people all over the world, actually. But and in there we talk about different policies and things, current event policies, everything that affect people's everyday life, especially their paychecks, their businesses. But my goal is really to empower employers with information that they can share with employees to open up those conversations and help people understand how all of this does affect their paycheck, and how to protect their own opportunity for human flourishing. So many people have come through, our public education systems and our universities, and they have not been taught the basic things about our God-given rights, but also that our system of government protects those rights. And that system of government is really what has allowed for us to have this freedom that we're trying to preserve. It is that is so precious. So reintroducing that to people in the workforce who really didn't learn that in school and never really understood, some people, you show them the Bill of Rights, they've never read the Bill of Rights. So if they've never read it, how will they know who to vote for to protect their rights? So, just giving employers tools to, in a very nonpartisan, caring manner, just present that information so people have a broader sense of understanding when they go to vote. But then this online course I have too, we just kind of go through that. Then we go through basic principles of, and policies of prosperity, basic economic policies dealing into, minimum wage mandates, or what happens when the government runs out of money, regulatory issues, things. But it's just getting, I think, the employers to communicate with employees, and the employees start to understand the owner perspective a little more, but then also helping them to learn how to be informed, involved citizens, and really protecting their own things. So, a lot of business groups or organizations like to promote and represent business like to the government. I would like to help business talk about policy to their employees, so that those employees, the grassroots people, the grassroots citizens in America, understand that they are the voice that matters. They are the ones that can contact their elected officials. They don't have to wait for someone else to do it, and they will have the tools to understand how to think through issues. So that's kind of a long answer for what you asked, but it helps people understand the vision of Prosperity 101.
All right. And if people want to get in touch with you and learn more about what you do, what's the best way that they can do that?
They can go to my website, prosperity101.com, and I'd love to work with any business, to license my course within, or to come in and do a workshop, or whatever it is that would be most helpful for your business, because every business is different, and all politics is local and every business is different. But I'd be happy to work with anybody to, just really help educate their workforce. So prosperity101.com.
All right. And we'll link all that in the show notes for everyone.
Thank you so much.
All right. Well, Linda, thank you so much for taking the time and sharing all this valuable wisdom with our audience. We greatly appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
All right. And that's all the time we have for now. We will see you next time.